You know, I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. You know, I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Walk, come on and walk, walk with your mind on freedom. Walk with your mind on freedom. Welcome to a special edition of ToHealDC during this very special day, Dr. King's official birthday. This is part of a day-long tribute to the radical Dr. King. You can be listening to WPFW till midnight tonight to hear all the different programs. This particular show, these next 2 hours, we're on till 12 noon. The theme is for these next 2 hours, with the spirit of Dr. King. Our task is to discover how to organize our strength into compelling power. That's a quote from Dr. King. And we'll be hearing from activists across the generations organizing to strengthen and protect our lives, our community, in a world with more justice and more peace. And I'm here in a room, everybody needs to make sure you're on mute when you're not talking. I'm happy to have Sam Collins helping me with this broadcast.
Peace and blessings, Joni. How you doing? Well, like Joni was saying, I'm Sam PK Collins from the Washington Informer newspaper. And I'm just very happy that we have quite a lineup this morning. And as I talk about Dr. King, I also have to acknowledge the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, who was pardoned by President Biden yesterday, and somebody who Dr. King acknowledged as a progenitor in the civil rights and human rights struggle. So definitely have to shout that out.
Absolutely, and we're very proud of the role that some of our WPFW family played in making sure that Marcus Garvey was exonerated by the president. We're also happy that a lot of our several of our PFW family members were part of the people, the army of people who organized to make today a holiday for Dr. King. We are usually this day of the year, every year, we're out in the streets in Anacostia with the annual Martin Luther King Peace Walk and Parade. This year took place inside on Saturday. And for that reason, we're thankful to be doing this show, those of us who are actually speaking on the air, live from Union Temple. And we're very thankful to Union Temple for offering their space. We're honored to introduce and have Reverend Dr. Anika Wilson say a few words to welcome us and welcome you listeners today. Good morning, Reverend Dr. Anika.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you today?
And great.
Great. I'm so glad to be here with you and to be able to share this space at this most profound time in our history. We welcome you to Union Temple, and we are so glad that we were able to host the space for you. and more importantly, that we are able to have this conversation, this radical conversation as we move forward in purpose and power and what God has called us to in this season and time. I am grateful that we get to have this conversation today about who I deem to be one of our most notable shapeshifters in our history, and whose words continue to give us life and move us forward with the great assignment that God has given us to create a new world where all are equal and all have their rights in this country. And so I think it's important for us to have this conversation, because the message of Dr. King has been so diluted and detached from its broader context and meaning. Like most messages that are commercialized, it has been colonized and stripped of much of its power to give us the ability to disrupt, to interrupt, and to stand 10 toes down against the powers of oppression and the systemic barriers that we face in this world. I think now we see a lot of folks rocking with Dr. King, but there were not many who rocked with him at the time because his message was very revolutionary and very radical. And when you are a disruptor, you are never popular. You are not popular. And so I think it is powerful that we get to bring our collective energy to speak his name, and not just speak his name in vain, but to reclaim the radical legacy of disruption. One of the quotes that he often said in a few of his speeches, quoting a Unitarian minister, Theodore Parker, he said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And I preached a message yesterday out of Isaiah 59, encouraging the congregation that the arc toward justice will bend, but it will not bend itself. It is us that must do the work to build and bend and reclaim the power to build an equitable society. And so I'm grateful to be here. I welcome you all here. I look forward to the conversation as we continue to co-create this great commission and calling, as we continue to move forward, confronting the cost of silence and speaking truth to power, and rebuilding our connection as community. Thank you for allowing me to be here, and thank you for letting Union Temple host you today.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Anika. I heard you gave a very powerful talk yesterday in church. Tyrone Parker, who's also part of the WPFW family, we may be hearing from him soon. He's shared with me that you gave a very powerful talk and talked about what we're going to be facing, or what we are facing in the next few hours as we walk into this 2025 with this new, I'm going to call him so-called president.
Yes.
And we also are going to be taking the spirit of your father, Dr. Reverend Willie Wilson, who has been on the air with us many, many years. And we thank you and your whole family for what you do to stand for peace and stand for justice.
Thank you
always. So thank you very much, Reverend Dr. Anika. We appreciate you. We're going to be followed now by another minister, perhaps two ministers speaking next, and that is two ministers from Faith Ministries, Reverend Patricia Fears, and possibly Reverend Graylan Hagler may be joining us as well. So welcome, Reverend Patti.
Hello. Thank you so much, Joni, for having me. And hello to my dear sister, the Reverend Dr. Anika Wilson Brown. I'm so glad to be in the midst. And always Faith Strategies is engaged when we have our leader with us. So Reverend Hagler, glad to see that you made it.
Yes. And welcome, Reverend Hagler.
Thank you.
And we couldn't, we feel we couldn't do this particular show without the spirit and participation of Reverend Hagler, who's been out there on the front lines on many issues, but and we're proud of him for all the issues where he's been working, helped to put together faith strategies, definitely out there when it comes to Gaza, and much, much more. Reverend Patti, do you want to start? Or
Well, I'm going to let Reverend Hagler, if he could see how long he's going to last, because I know he has something that he's dealing with. So I want him to go ahead and get started, because I don't want you to miss what he has to say.
Thank you, Patti. It's good to be here. It's good to be here with Reverend Wilson Brown and everybody else. I got a new voice that I'm struggling with. I had no voice. I got a little voice. And so I'm coming back. But one of the things that I just wrote about was that if you look at the history of racial justice in America, it doesn't exist on a linear line, but it exists as a circle, which means that every gain that we've made, there's been a vicious backlash to take it back. And we often end up right where we began. From the Civil War, through Reconstruction, to the struggles of the 20th century, into the struggles of the 21st century. So our battles continue. And we got to be mindful of them, because we're going to hear a whole lot of platitudes about the progress we've made. But the reality is, we are back here exactly where we were at the end of Reconstruction. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. And I wanted to share, since this is Dr. King's day, the quote that impacts me is like, especially as it relates to Gaza. And we have seen this quote unquote ceasefire, which is a good thing. But we also have to understand what Dr. King says. It says, peace is not merely the absence of tension. It is the presence of justice. And so until justice comes to the Palestinian, there's always going to be that notion of war and issues. We have to continue, and I'm so glad Reverend Hagler, who has a very compelling article, and it'll be out in several publications, as it relates to this circular understanding that this government has with its people. The president that is coming in, and even as they're gathering for the inauguration, has to understand that whether you like us or not, whether we voted for you or not, you are still the president of the entire United States. And we have to hold the standards and the banner up in his face constantly. We can't acquiesce. We can't accept. We have to continue to push. And I think as it relates to Gaza, David Chappelle said it best on Saturday. He made it very, very clear. It's just like, we cannot forget our humanity. All of us. We have to remember that regardless, we have to have compassion for displaced people, whether they're in the Palisades or if they're in Palestine. Now, that's what David Chappelle had told our young people on Saturday. We have to remember that too, that this country has a interesting way of treating people that they don't look like them. They don't look like the original people. And so, and I won't say the original people, because we know that they were the natives in the country. They have a tendency not to want to treat us with the same value. And so we have to continue to demand that information for that justice. And I think that even as we're dealing with the ceasefire, we see that 90 prisoners, and prisoners is an overstatement, it's just 90 mothers and children that were captured, and the release of 3 little girls. That's just the beginning. We have to continue to make sure that aid gets to these countries. We cannot fall for the distractions that'll be thrown in our faces with all of this nonsense, these clowns that are going into office. We have to hold them to a higher standard. We have to let them know that we are here and we have the right to be here and we want to stake our claim. So we have to continue to fight the good fight.
Yeah, thank you, Reverend Patti. I wonder if Reverend Hagler might be able to jump on. This is a so-called ceasefire. We're going to be hearing from some young people in the second hour from Howard University, who I think are going to delve deeper into is it really going to be a ceasefire? As soon as it was announced that the deal was going to be made, they killed another 200 people. People who are not being killed, they have no place to eat, they have no food to eat, and it continues to be a horrific genocide. Reverend Hagler, if you could say any words about that. You've been out there on the front line in Palestine for decades, for quite some time.
Oh, it's amazing. People want to credit Trump with the ceasefire. Trump is as bad as Biden. The fact is that Trump and his son-in-law were basically furthering apartheid when he was in office. Now it's going to be worse. So we got to realize this is smoke and mirrors, and it may not last.
Absolutely. And they say that they're bringing trucks in for aid, but we don't know where these trucks are going. And like you said, they're still killing people. People are now, for the first time, being allowed to go back to certain enclaves, but they're still trying to see whether or not Hamas may be hiding in the rubble, basically, because there's no home left. So it is a very tentative and very, I won't even say, they say ceasefire because that's a cute name, but the reality is that there's still a lot of work to be done. And so one of the things that I want to make sure, and I know Reverend Hagler and I had been to Palestine and seen and talked with a number of people to make sure that we don't fall for the hype. The ceasefire is just the language they heard us crying for, and they'll give it back to us. Now we have to make sure that they actually implement it. We know that it's a process. We understand that we're not strange to this, but we have to make sure that they do everything that they said they're going to do and not try to push the line further into the land grab that's been going on.
Reverend Fears,
Yes,
I have
sir.
a question, if you don't mind.
No.
What is the next step as far as pushing for something that's authentic beyond the ceasefire, organizationally? How does that look among churches?
Among churches, I mean, we have a lot of churches that are even afraid to talk ceasefire. So we're still struggling with some of that very basic language. But we have to attach with the organizations that are on the ground, helping to push the aid to the people, to connect with the leadership, the faith leadership in Palestine. We have a number of people, Muslim and Christians, that we are able to talk to. And we need to connect with them to find out what their needs are. That's one of the things that has been done to us that we can't do to other people, to tell them what they need. Let them tell us what they need and connect. And so I think as we continue to organize through a number of the groups, there's some Ceasefire DC that are still going on. We need to connect with them to find out exactly what those needs are and make sure that they're getting what they need.
Oh, okay. Reverend Hagler, do you have a final comment about the situation? And again, I think we all know, many listeners of PFW know that this so-called ceasefire, we still have a lot of work to do to organize to stop the genocide. The genocide is going to be going on if food can't come, get to the people, if people don't have places to eat, people don't have water to drink. So the genocide is continuing, and we need, as Sam Collins just mentioned, we need to continue to organize. It's not a time to relax and slow down. We have a lot to do, and I want to really, I think many of us who work with Graylan Hagler over the many years are proud of him and proud of the work that he's done over many years, bringing ministers to Gaza to see what's happening firsthand, etc. So we're going to keep on organizing until people can live, the Palestinian people can live in Palestine. And we still have a ways to go. We're proud of the demonstrations that have been going on even in the last few days out there in the streets. We'll be covering that. Most of the demonstrators couldn't be on the show today because they're still out in the streets. But by next week, we'll have more reports from what's happening right now on the ground. But people are still fighting, and we're proud of the people out there who are fighting to stop this genocide. Reverend Hagler, you have any final comment before we move on?
Well, our struggle and solidarity with Palestinians is our struggle against white supremacy worldwide, because that fits in with the paradigm that we're fighting in America, that we fought in Southern Africa, that we fight wherever there's people of color. We got to struggle against white supremacy. And you have the cheerleader of white supremacy being sworn in as president today. So the struggle is intensified.
Reverend Graylan Hagler, all I can say is we love you. You're going to be marching with us. You're always going to be with us. And again, we thank you and the many others who have fought with you to stand up against this genocide, even before other people weren't really talking about it. So Reverend Hagler, Reverend Patti Fears, keep on keeping on. And we're proud of Faith Ministries too, and all the ministers who were standing there with you. So, okay, you're listening again to a special 2-hour program where we're talking about with activists from across generations, organizing to strengthen and protect our lives, our community in a world with more justice, more peace. In other words, we still have a lot of work to do. Thankful to have Sam Collins helping me out this morning. Sam Collins with the Washington Informer and an activist in his own right. We were scheduled to have Frank Smith with the African American Civil War Museum and as our next speaker, and I'm going to ask our engineer, Kalia, to give him a call.
I'm on, Johnny.
Oh, you're on. Yay. Okay. Terrific. Okay. Frank Smith. First of all, we want to let everyone know who doesn't know that Frank Smith is also a veteran of SNCC. For those young people who don't know what SNCC is, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Marion Barry was very much a part of SNCC, to say the least. And that was part of Frank's early days. And then he came to D.C. Way back when in the, I think, early 70s. And was a city council person for many years. And then I'm going to let him say what he then did as he founded the African American Civil War Museum. So Frank's going to talk to us about where do we go from here and some of his concerns about what may be happening soon and also some lessons from SNCC. So welcome, Frank.
Good morning, Joni, and good morning to the listening audience. And I'm happy to be back with you on this Martin Luther King Day. His birthday was actually January the 15th. I'm sure the audience knows this already. His birthday was actually January the 15th, and he would have been 96 years old if he were living at that time. But the nation has chosen to set aside January 20th. This year, January 20th, as the day when the nation will celebrate his birthday, and let me just say it as I sit here and look out of my window here and see all the snow on the ground that my daughter, whom I'm going to see later on today, told me when she was in high school. She's a 55-year-old mother now of three wonderful grandchildren of mine. But she was in high school then. I think she was in 10th or 12th grade. We were out on that mall on one day just like this. It was snowy and cold, and we were waiting on Stevie Wonder to come. We were trying to get the nation to establish this holiday, trying to get this holiday on the record. And so we were out there on that mall, and it was snowing, and it wasn't snowing. It was sun was shining just like this, but it was cold as I don't know what. Probably as cold as it is today. And we were standing around out there. So my daughter, in her word of wisdom, she said, Daddy, she said, we may get Martin Luther King birthday one day, but you and I are not going to be able to see it because we're going to be frozen to death by the time we get this holiday. So
and Frank, let me just jump in and say, and many of us were out there in that cold, snowy day after we marched. And what some young people don't know is when Stevie Wonder came out there that day, that was perhaps the first time he sang the happy birthday song to Stevie, to Dr. King.
That's right.
So that's a moment we'll never forget.
Right, absolutely. And I'm glad we were able to survive that cold weather.
Oh, it was freezing.
A little bit frostbitten, but I wanted to say that because I wanted to remind the nation and also the young people as you referred to earlier that we didn't get any of these holidays or any of these accomplishments by just begging for them and by just asking for them. We had to put in a lot of marching, we had to endure a lot of bitter cold and a lot of in some cases starvation, and in some cases even people were killed in this process of demonstrating and trying to change this country. So it's been a long struggle, and Dr. King is a symbolic leader of that struggle for a couple of reasons. One is because he was personally gifted, great orator, no question about that. And secondly, because he stayed on the battlefield. He was born in Georgia. He died in Tennessee, and the only two and for a moment some many years he lived in Alabama. So the only three addresses he ever had in his life were Georgia, Alabama, and you might say Tennessee, which is where he gave up his life working with those garbage workers there. So I wanted to pay that tribute to Dr. King, because I was a member of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and we were a little bit different than Dr. King's organization. I'm 82 years old now, but I was young one time. And when I was young and in my early 20s, Dr. King's method of demonstrating and waiting and praying was just a little too slow for us. So we wanted something that moved faster. So we set up something called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And we worked hand in glove. But we were two different organizations. We had two different ways of doing things. We had two different ways of making decisions. And we also had two many different ways, I guess, of mourning our dead. Because people did get killed in the struggle. And so I wanted to share those two stories with you. And then finally, I'll just make this last comment, and then I'll let you ask me some questions, Johnny. I'm one of the few people who actually saw him within 48 hours before he was killed. I've said this many times, and I'm honored to be able to say this, that I saw him at the airport in Memphis. He was coming back from Atlanta to Memphis to join a march with the garbage workers there in Memphis who were being mistreated and by the government, by the city of Memphis and the state of Tennessee. And so we had a chance encounter at the airport where I saw him there, and I got to speak to him for a few minutes. He asked me to come to Memphis actually to help him to organize what he called the Young Panthers that were throwing rocks and making these. He said they're going to cause the authorities here to be more violent and so and I told him I had come to Washington D.C. and I moved out of Mississippi. I'm on my way down there right now to Mississippi. That's what I'm doing in Memphis, changing planes. But I don't live there anymore. I've changed my address to Washington D.C. And I said I hung up my marching shoes. And so in his last words to me, he said, "Frank Smith, don't ever hang up your marching shoes." And he left. And of course, the next day he was killed and on that hotel place there in Memphis, Tennessee. And so that's my message to you today. Dr. King's message to you, my message to you is don't ever hang up your marching shoes. When Donald Trump thinks he's going to take over this government and turn back all of the things that we ever did in the civil rights movement and various other things, he's not going to be able to do it because we're not going to hang up our marching shoes. We're going to keep on marching until all those things that Dr. King talked about become a reality.
Absolutely. And Frank, tell listeners who may not know when you started the African American Civil War Museum, which sometimes I call the best kept secret in Washington, D.C. It's one of the very, very special places. So tell the listeners why you founded it and what's going to be happening this year with the museum.
Okay. Well, let me say it's not such a big secret anymore, Joni, because it's now recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records. It's now internationally recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records as the monument with more names than any other monument in the world. And we've taken these guys from a time when nobody ever heard of them. Nobody ever paid them any attention. Their family members knew, and the history books knew about them because they had obviously done something great in history. They had joined up with President Abraham Lincoln. 200,000 of them had joined with President Abraham Lincoln, joined the Union Army. And just to give people some idea of what 200,000 soldiers represented at that time, one writer, George Washington Williams, said when this army was formed back in 1861 to 65, that this was the largest standing army of black soldiers in the history of the world. Now, that may still be true, by the way, you all. I don't know. I'm trying to verify that now, but George Washington Williams said that in those days. And so, but it took that for Lincoln to end the war. And 3 out of 4 of them, when they joined the war, had been enslaved on those plantations where they were living. In other words, Lincoln armed slaves. And he had to do that because that was the only way he could win this war. He was outnumbered and he wasn't really outnumbered. The war was being fought in the South. The Confederacy had just organized itself. And so Lincoln, so now why isn't that in the history books of the United States? I don't think America wanted the world to know that they had to turn. I think white people were embarrassed to be able to have to say that in order for us to save democracy, we had to turn to the enslaved people to help us. Lincoln had to turn to the people who were formerly slaves, put them in uniform, put rifles on their shoulders and bullets in their pockets, and put them on these battlefields. Now, so why do I get interested in this? Why do I keep talking about this story? I grew up in the days of the Civil Rights Movement. I was in many demonstrations and marches, and you heard me say earlier I met Dr. King. I know that we don't get treated fairly in the United States. We've never been treated fairly. So why should you think we're going to be treated fairly in history? Well, people have to tell their own story. If you don't tell your own story, just as Jackson once said, history sometimes is America telling his story, and sometimes he tells his story and leave your story out. Well, how do you get your story in there? You got to tell your own story. So you got to build your own monuments, your own museums. Why do you have to do that? Because it gets rough and tough out here sometimes. And days like this, when you think you're having trouble trying to see your way past all the fog and all of the confusion that's going on now, you have to turn to your past. We turn to those people. We say to ourselves, our people have gone through greater toils and tribulations than we are seeing now. And we have made much more progress than the days when these people had to join the Union Army and go back to the same places where they'd been enslaved before. We made much more progress. So we didn't have our own ways of reminding ourselves that we have done something good. We're good people. We'll fight for our freedom. We'll fight for our rights. And we're not going to stop doing that. And so we use museums and monuments and actually teachers in our classrooms and parents in their homes and preachers in the churches and neighbors in the neighborhood. We use those as ways to inspire our young people to do the right thing, and because they have to do the right thing in order for us to continue the progress.
And Frank, we're almost out of time. I hate to say that because usually you're on with us for a while, but we have a packed show today. Tell us, your museum is expanding and will open, I think, in July.
Absolutely.
So that's something to look forward to. But before we leave, tell us one or two concerns that you shared with me about. Of course, there are many things to be concerned about, but you talked specifically, I think, about the park service, and just share maybe one or two things that are on the top of your mind.
Yeah, I've looked at 2 areas of the government to see what possible impact the policies that were described in that 2025 paper that was put together by Blueprint. We'll call it that, Blueprint. that was put together by Trump mega people. They started writing on this before he won the election. So when he after he won, they were going to be able to implement all of this. So I looked at the things they were talking about doing, and one of the things I'm concerned about is that the National Park Service, who is our partner at the African American Civil War Memorial at 10th and U Street Northwest by the Masonic Building, we have the museum is in a building owned by the city. The park where all the names are is across the street on a site that's a federal site, which means now it's under the National Park Service. So I should be concerned about how that's going to be talked about in the Park Service, and I think what you're going to see immediately is them going after some low hanging fruit. They've already talked about some of these military bases that were named after Confederate people that were changed during the Biden administration and the Obama administrations. Now they're talking about changing those names back to those Confederate soldiers. Some of these places where they had Confederate flags flying over battlefields and other places that we pressured them to take those down. I mean, why are you going to have a battle flag of the people who lost the war, who were trying to destroy America? Why are you going to have that up? So some of these people are talking about putting that back up. So I think you'll see some what I call low-hanging fruit like that. But it won't bother us, and it won't bother the African American Civil War Museum because the museum is not a part of the Park Service. It's owned. The building is owned by the city. We're in the old Grimke building, owned by the city. We have a 99-year lease. We're spending about $10 million to get it completely rehabbed, adding new exhibits, and we're going to open in July 18th, 2025. We're behind now by a couple of years, but we're going to open up, and God places these things in the right order. This kind of we're going to need the museum more than ever for the next 4 years.
And you know whose birthday is July 18th?
Whose birthday?
Nelson Mandela. If I'm not mistaken. So you picked the right date, and we're just about out of time with you, Frank. But I must ask you if you can say in one or two sentences. Of course, we're concerned what's going to happen with the District of Columbia. We have many concerns, but one is how do we, moving forward, protect the rights of Washington, of the District of Columbia, as Trump may try to take us over?
Well, the District of Columbia is what I'm going to call a creature of the federal government. It's in the Constitution that way, that the nation will create a place where they hold all the federal meetings and things like that. And that place became known as District of Columbia. And they placed the administration of it under the U.S. Congress, and which means the president gets to appoint people. And, when I first got here, we didn't have the right to vote for any of these elected officials, the mayor or the council or any of those in 1968. But thanks to all the hard work of people like David Clark and John Wilson and I guess Walter Washington and all these various people, Polly Shackleton, and others, we were able to get what we call limited home rule, where we do get to vote for our mayor and our city council. Now we've been pushing for statehood for all these many years. We should be a state. We should have a governor like our governor, like Delaware, which is right next door, has fewer people, pays fewer taxes than we do. But they get senators. We don't get senators. So we thought we'd be able to get that. It's going to be tougher now with this administration, but we won't give up the fight. And let me also remember everybody, every 4 years in the United States, there is an election. Actually, there's going to be an election in 2 years. So we're just going to have to work harder and work smarter like they did when they were out of office. We're going to have to work harder and work smarter, get ready for these next 2 elections so we can change this thing, so we can protect our rights and protect the gains that we've already made and give hope and promise to our young people that we shall overcome.
Thank you very much, Frank Smith, founder of the African American Civil War Museum, opening up on July 18th in an expanded version. Hopefully, maybe we'll have a chance to hear from Frank before we leave at 12 noon again with some final comments. But I want to quickly jump to our next speaker, Dr. Edwin Chapman, who is, many of us consider him he is a community physician on the front lines, and we consider him one of the heroes when it comes to our health care in the city and actually around the country. So welcome, Dr. Chapman.
Thank you, Joni. It's certainly a pleasure to be here, and certainly at the historic Union Baptist Church. so many things that originated here. I came to Washington 60 years ago, and 60 years ago, I was a freshman in Nathan Hare's class, sociology class, and scared to death. For those who don't know, Nathan Hare, or Dr. Nathan Hare, was a mentor to Stokely Carmichael and Claude Brown. So as a second semester freshman, I was in a classroom where the conversation literally scared me to death because there were so many upperclassmen talking about these radical, what I consider to be radical ideas coming from Gary, Indiana. But as time passed, I went on to medical school at Howard, graduated in 1973. And one of my psychiatry instructors, Dr. Elise Galati, was also a member of this church. So I could just name hundreds of people as the years went by that I was educated in Washington, D.C. over the past 60 years, including Tyrone Parker. It's just one person after another. And we've come to realize that if we look back at a period which some would call the Gilded Age, 1870 to 1900, also corresponding with the so-called Black codes, we can understand post-Civil War that healthcare in America was never intended to be given equally to Black folks. So there were systems put in place even to today. We can explain now why we don't have universal health care in this country, and it originated during that period. So if we really study that era, we can see now that we're in what I would call the second Gilded Age, where we have billionaires or our so-called American oligarchs controlling virtually everything, including healthcare. And we now have a healthcare system that excludes certain people on purpose. And those people are people who are generally poor, generally rely on government support. And because of this greed and a culture of corruption that we're now seeing, where billionaires come in and buy votes, we also know now that these same people are controlling our healthcare system. And that is why we have continued inequities in healthcare. And I can really now dig very deeply into connecting the dots. A situation that happened in New York City and on December the 4th to our healthcare system here in Washington, D.C., and why we have so many people dying of overdoses. In fact, we have the highest per capita opioid overdose rate for African Americans anywhere in the country.
Absolutely. And as we've talked over the years, DC has the worst statistics in many specific illnesses. I think kidney disease, we're one of the worst in the world. And of course, the discrepancy between Ward 8 and Ward 3 is years and years and years of life. I forget how many years it is, something like 15 years. People who live in Ward 3 often live 15 years or more longer than people who live in Ward 8. So we have a lot to do, and of course, with in the next few years, it's going to be even more challenging to continue to organize for universal health care in this country As we often say on this show, the United States is the only country in the industrialized world without universal health care for all its citizens. So it may not be, we may not be able to call it genocide, but it's definitely bad that we have thousands of people losing their lives each and every year because of lack of access to health care. Dr. Chapman, any other concerns you have moving forward? We're very thankful for you and all the work you do and all the support you do in the community. We're unfortunately we're not in a room where we can easily talk together, and I'm hearing a echo for some reason. But Dr. Chapman.
So yes, Joni, on the 25th of this month, on Saturday, we're going to be honored by having the W. Montague Cobb Institute, which is the premier African-American study group for health disparities. And at that meeting, you'll hear from the former Vice President of Health Affairs at Howard University, Dr. Victor Scott. You'll hear from the current Director of the Department of Medicine at Howard University, and you'll hear from the CEO and President of the W. Montague Cobb Institute, which was started over 20 years ago to study health disparities. On that program, we'll have the current president of the National Medical Association, and I'm sure that the president-elect of the National Medical Association, Dr. Roger Mitchell, who is the current president of Howard University Hospital, will also be present. So I encourage everyone who's interested in talking about and meeting leaders from all over the country in healthcare to be present. As a matter of fact, on Friday, the 24th, they're actually having a documentary shown from 5:30 to 7:30 in the Howard University Hospital auditorium on Dr. Cobb and a reception afterwards. So this is going to be a very important weekend as we talk about health disparities. And I think we never should forget that our mental health is the key. And one of the quotes that I always like to use is a quote from Amos Wilson: when you steal people's history, you can justify ruling over them and justify domination. More importantly, history may be used to influence personality, culture, roles, and to provoke us to commit menticide, and may be used to create or rationalize fratricide, genocide, and self-destruction. So we're at a point where we have to take control of our healthcare. And I always, a lot of times you hear people talking about personal responsibility in terms of healthcare, but our model is really based on an Afrocentric model, which is a community-based model of care, where we take care of one another. So the conference coming up on this weekend is really going to be a discussion about how we take care of our neighbors, how we look out for each other, how we make sure that everyone has insurance, how we make sure that everyone has something to eat, how we make sure that everyone has a roof over their head, which is just as important as taking your medicine. So we had a dramatic increase in homelessness during COVID, which really pulls the cover back on all of these issues that we're talking about. So housing is medicine.
And Dr. Chapman, repeat again what's the time and location of what's happening on Friday.
So on Friday, in the Howard University Hospital auditorium from 5:30 to 7:30, There will be a documentary showing of on Dr. Cobb, followed by a reception. And then on Saturday morning, there'll be a health disparities program covering many issues, including cancer, mental health, diabetes. Starting, the registration starts at 7:30. The program runs to 1 o'clock, and then afterwards, they're going to have a program encouraging young people to go into medicine.
Good. I want to also add that Dr. Martin Luther King was very much involved with the issue of organizing for healthcare for all. He spoke several times at an organization called Medical Committee for Human Rights, which was active with physicians and other activists during the 60s in Mississippi and elsewhere, but later moved up north, was housed in Chicago. Later, the national office was in Pittsburgh, where I was at the time. And Dr. King was very much a part of that struggle with that organization. Medical Committee for Human Rights was fighting for and organizing for universal health care back in the 60s and 70s with Dr. King right there in front. And I don't have the quote in front of me, but he has a famous quote about there's nothing as terrible as inequities. The most horrible inequities are those in healthcare, and certainly we're still seeing that today. We appreciate you, Dr. Chapman, and you will continue to be on our airwaves as a frequent guest on this show, ToHealDC, as well as Roach Brown Show, heard Tuesday mornings at 10. I think we have time for a few comments before we move into the second hour. And again, this is Joni with ToHealDC. Sam Collins is helping me out this morning. The theme for our hour, again, WPFW is doing a tribute to the radical Dr. King all day today up until midnight. In this particular 2 hours, we're looking at, we're talking with activists from across generations, organizing to strengthen and protect our lives, our communities, in a world with more justice, more peace. And let's see who could make a comment. I know Chuck Hicks was on the phone, and perhaps Tyrone can also jump in. Can either of you jump in with a comment?
Yeah, Johnny, I just think that what you have produced, what WPFW has produced today is just an eye-opener for a lot of young people who might not have known where we were and where we need to go. It's just been an excellent presentation thus far.
Okay, and do you have any memories back then? In a moment, we're going to be speaking with the representative from the union that represents sanitation workers. But if you have anything else you might want to share, if not, let's see if I can get to. I
remember, well, two things. Number one is, of course, when I was getting ready to run for student body president at Syracuse, where I became the first Black student body president, the night before my campaign was the day that Dr. King was assassinated. So I immediately called off my campaign at Syracuse until after his services. So that has always stood out to me, that how that happened and how I remember it so vividly. I also remember meeting him once in Mississippi, and I asked him, I said, Dr. King, do you ever get scared in these marches? He said, oh, son, I can't afford to be scared. He said, we got to just know that what we're doing is the right thing to do. And if we know that what we're the right thing to do, then we're all right, but we're not being scared. Because I will confess that many of the times when I marched, I was scared. And so when I got a chance to ask him, I said, do you ever get scared? Because I do. He said, oh, son, we don't really have time to be scared because we know what we're doing, that's right. And so we just keep doing it.
That's right. Anybody else who's on the Zoom want to jump in with a final comment? I know everybody's We have Tyrone Parker, who if he jumped on me, will have a lot to share as well about what happened when Dr. King was killed. Okay, great, Tyrone.
Yes, Joni, as we do this program, Martin Luther King's birthday, here at the historical Union Temple Church, with such rich individuals participating in. I just heard Frank Smith, and I just heard Chuck Hicks and Dr. Chapman and yourself. These are the historical aspects of why we're here. And as it was stated when Smith made mention of what was occurring pertaining to Martin Luther King's day becoming a holiday, I could never forget. I was working in a group home at that point in time. And the young kids, they wanted to go down to be a part of this historical moment. Their little things together, and one took a hat and the other took the shoes, and they made it so that two or three people, the kids, could go down to be a part of it. And as Frank stated, it was cold that day. But they're cold, and the winter would not stop these kids from wanting to be a part of this celebration of Martin Luther King. And it goes on today. The same spirit of the great Martin Luther King is the spirit that we bring here today for transformation in this historical revolutionary church known as Union Temple Baptist Church with Joni Eisenberg.
And you, Tyrone?
Tyrone, I remember exactly what happened. We were all at the monument, and it was freezing cold. We were waiting to hear Stevie Wonder sing. And as he started to sing, the sun just burst open.
That's right. That's absolutely right. The sun just started shining.
Just burst out.
This is going to be his birthday. I'll never forget that we were freezing and Stevie Wonder started singing, and all of a sudden the sun rolled and just burst open.
Good God!
Yes,
we had it. We knew it was there.
Dr. Chapman?
In 1995, in preparation for the Million Man March, right here in this church, the stage was filled with Reverend Willie Wilson, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, Reverend Chavis, every imaginable leader was right here on that stage. And they allowed 20 people to speak for 1 minute about why they were attending the Million Man March. And I got 1 minute on that day, and I'll never forget that. This is just a historic location.
And we have about a minute left, but Tyrone, if you could just share what happened on Saturday when, for the first time, the annual Anacostia Peace Walk and Parade were inside, and you had a very inspiring story you shared with me about the young people there.
You know, as Joni stated, we celebrated Martin Luther King's birthday, the Peace March Parade. And we were over at the entertainment center. We had maybe about 2,500 people there. But one of the most outstanding things for me was to be able to see a number of the youth that we had worked with over the years taking leadership roles in regards to the Peace March. They were there for public safety to begin to take on their part and their role. And at one point in time, they was part of gang. They were a part of the crew. But you take the aspects of time with support, love, and commitment. They now are performing public safety components of it. We have even had the deputy fire chief, who used to be a part of Garfield gang, is now the deputy fire chief. We had a number of other young brothers and sisters that were in different gangs, but are now a part of public safety. Chuck, we're seeing some extraordinary things.
Yes. Tyrone Parker, we are proud of you. We are proud of Chuck Hicks. We're proud of Dr. Chapman. We're proud of all of our listeners out there who continue to be out there in the front lines, no matter what you might be doing. You might think it's something small, but you're working to change this society. We're heading into our second hour. Kalia, I don't know if you had something you want.
You're listening to Why the Radical King is Needed Now More Than Ever, WPFW's annual MLK Remembrance on Inauguration Day 2025, on your station for jazz and justice, WPFW, Washington.
Heard you looking for peace. Peace ain't gonna be easy, no. Gotta get together somehow and work peace. If you believe in peace, time to work peace. Peace ain't gonna be free, gonna have to work peace. Tell everybody you know I'm gonna have to work peace. Ain't gonna be no freedom without peace. Ain't gonna be no freedom without peace. Never gonna be no freedom without peace. Peace ain't gonna be free.
Okay, that's Will Scott Heron. We got to work for peace, and we know that we do have to work for peace. Gil Scott Heron could have written this morning. Still very relevant. For most of the hour today, we're going to be, this particular hour, we're going to be hearing more from young people out there in the community. In a few moments, we're going to be hearing from Howard University students, but we're going to top off the hour. Hopefully, he is on the phone. Kevin Pogue would ask me, District Council 20, who represents sanitation workers, among other workers in the city. Kevin, are you with us?
I'm with you.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
So happy you could join us.
Definitely.
So tell our listeners, and as we know, some young people may not know the story of Dr. King and what he had to do with the sanitation workers down there in Memphis. But whatever you'd like to start with, Kevin, tell us a little bit about AFSCME District Council 20 and also about the division that represents sanitation workers here in D.C.
Most definitely. So I represent Local 2091 at AFSCME, Local 2091, and I also represent District Council 20. First, let me say honor to the brother Charles Hicks. He's a very strong supporter of my local and a very good friend to the District Council 20, a very good leader and a historian, and honor to you, sir. Honor to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on this day. I would like to say about collections in this city. I represent the ones that are in collections, recycling, yard waste, bulk trash, disposal, sweep inspectors, and office of cable television. My biggest group is collections, and those men and women that do collection, I think, don't get the big spotlight on them like they should, because for the simple fact, these men and women are out there right now, because we had to sit down with the director and they had to, do some overtime because the inauguration fell on the same day as Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. So what's happening is now that we're out there and it's below freezing out there, and they have to be out there to make sure that the city is clean and on point. We just come through a situation where we had to fight for protection of certain jobs and collections because the city administrator wanted to bring in contractors. And that right there was a fight that we tried to, defy, that we tried to put out, because for the simple fact that was telling us that you don't believe that these workers that you have in the District of Columbia that does collections can't do their job. So the men and women that I represent, they showed up and showed out, and they got the trash up. They got the alleys up. They got the yard waste. We're still working on recycling, but no contractors in the district at this time doing what collections has done for years in the district. So I'm grateful and thankful for that. But I think what Martin Luther King did for us in starting that organization and starting the organizing in Memphis, I think that we need to be able to continue. So when the torch was passed, we want to continue, and we want to, like Brother Hicks said earlier, we want to keep the young ones engaged because they're coming up behind us and they don't know what it is to have these type of jobs and have this type of pride in the job that you do and in the work that you do, especially when you're taking care of your city. And I'm grateful and thankful again to you, Joni, for allowing me the opportunity to be on WPFW to explain what it is we do in the community.
Absolutely, and we're honored to have you, Kevin Pogue. Again, for the younger people who may not know, we've done many broadcasts on this, including in December, on December 16th, when we honored Bill Lucy, who was very much a part of Ask Me and was down there in Memphis, and he helped to make sure that Dr. King got there. What happened in Memphis in 1968, 2 sanitation workers were killed because of the racism in that city. They could not go inside of a nearby room when it was pouring down thunder and rain, and they sat on the garbage truck and the garbage truck was struck by lightning and they were both killed. There was a major organizing that took place for months. The 2 deaths happened in February and Dr. King was killed in April. And some of you may remember and know the sign, I am a man, because the sanitation workers were not treated with the respect as human beings should be treated. And we know that is still going on today. And Kevin, you couldn't be with us in December, but in our December program, we talked about the fact that just recently 2 sanitation workers in Baltimore were killed. I don't know if you can speak to that at all, Kevin, but and also you've had, I was told, a young man who died as well. Did you want to say anything about about that situation? That two and it's still infuriating that we really didn't hear about it enough. But share with the listeners your thoughts on that.
Well, it's always a sad day when anyone loses their life, but especially, again, doing the jobs that the men and women I represent do in collections. We heard about the 2, I think the 2 collection workers that lost their life in Baltimore and it came across our desk. We went out to our members to continue to tell them to be safe. We worked alongside DPW Safety Department to try to make sure that we were in compliance and that we were being proactive as opposed to being reactive. But it's always sad. My heart goes out to those families because those guys were out there doing a job, and they were out there working and trying to feed their families. And we need to be more mindful that these are dangerous jobs that we do. We work with machineries. We work with trucks, hydraulic, air brake. These things are when you put them in the hand of certain people, they can become very, very dangerous. And we have to know exactly what we're doing when we're doing the job. So again, my heart goes out to that family, but here in the district, we would like to just be able to make sure that the Department of Public Works is more active in being safety wise, because safety is paramount. And we have to make sure that these men and women that come out to do the job, if they get there at 6 a.m. in the morning, that they're allowed to go home the same way at 4 in the evening that they got there at 6 a.m. this morning. We want them to go with all 10 toes, all 10 fingers. We want them to go back home the same way they got there. And if we're not proactive, then we become reactive, and then we're all sitting around trying to figure out, the next step. I don't like that. I like to put safety first. I think District Council 20 likes to put safety. I know for a fact we like to put safety first. My local, we put safety first in each and every department and each and every agency that we work in. But again, things happen, accidents happen, and we have to be mindful that we have to look out for each other. And then we do have the younger ones too, that's coming through the door that need to be trained up and need to be taught by the older guys and the older women that are there. And I appreciate the members that we have on the work they do when they do that.
And Kevin, and we look forward to having you on more frequently. Perhaps we need to have regular reports. As Dr. King, I don't know if you remember the quote, but Dr. King also lifted up the sanitation workers and said, I don't have it in front of me, but basically said, they're just as important as physicians. Without the sanitation workers out there in the streets, and they're not getting the respect and they're not getting the support they need to do their job safely. But without those sanitation workers out there in the streets, there would be a lot more illness in this city and in this country. So Kevin, I think one step moving forward is we need to organize. Part of this day and these 2 hours are talk about how do we strengthen our organizing and organize across silos. We shouldn't all be, we need to be working together, and we need a movement that's going to support the sanitation workers and demand that they get the support that is needed to save their lives. I remember during the COVID, some of us fought to try to get the sanitation workers to be prioritized on the top of the list to get those vaccines, but no, they weren't considered special workers, so that we had to fight for that. But Kevin, I hope that moving forward, when we're going into this new kind of I'm going to say frightening period of 2025, we can figure out a way to organize the people who are organizing for Gaza, the people that are organizing to support young people in Ward 8. We all need to somehow figure out a way to work together. So Kevin, let's see if we can move in that direction this year. And
absolutely,
we thank you. Your final thought for today.
My last time being on WPFW, again, thank you. But my last time being here, I asked the residents of the District of Columbia to come out and talk to some of your collections employees. Talk to them, hear what they got to say. That way you can talk to some of your council members, and so send letters and emails, and talk to them, and they'll be able to tell you exactly what they need out there doing the job, especially like you said, John. Man, without the collection workers, man, could you imagine the rats that would overrun DC? So, we ask people to get out and talk to the collection workers, talk to any city worker for that matter. And I also say, to all the leaders, especially the young ones and the ones that's coming up in my generation, we need to get out. That's a strong part of organizing, is to get out and to talk to people. Get out there, share what's going on. Let people know what it is that we do in the community and in the city, and talk to them. And that's how we get people together. That's how we pull people together. Because if you're not out there moving around and talking and showing your face, and as Bill Lucy used to say, boots on the ground. You don't have them boots on the ground, you're not doing anything. So I think that's a large part of organizing, and a large part of getting the community involved.
Absolutely. And thank you, Kevin Poe. Kevin is now the president of Ask Me DC Council 20. And I think DC Council 20 represents more workers than any other union in the area. And I just wanted to quote Dr. King before we need to move on. Our task is to discover how to organize our strength into compelling power. So I'm going to challenge all the listeners out there and all the organizers out there. Let's figure out better ways to work together and support each other and support people like the workers that work with Kevin Pogue out there in the streets every day. That's something we need to commit to and think about on Dr. King's birthday. Okay,
Johnny,
real
can
quick,
I-
Chuck. Yes.
My dad used to say all the time, the union is the best friend a working man can have.
Or woman. Absolutely.
Or worst friend a woman or man can have. If you get a best supervisor, you have a best friend, and the supervisor tells you he wants you to fight that best friend. If you got a union, I can't do that. They got a contract.
That's right.
Yeah. The union is the best friend a worker can have, worker man.
Yeah. And of course, we sometimes have to work to make sure the unions are representing us. But with that said, unfortunately, we need to move on. We have a packed show today, and we thank Kevin Pogue and Chuck for hanging in there with us. We're now going to move into a segment. The rest of their show is going to be featuring young people. We're going to first hear from two young people from Howard University, and after we hear from them, we're going to hear from young people from the community right here in Ward 8. And over the last year and a half, we've had many groups talking about what's happening in Gaza, organizing out in the street to stop the genocide in Gaza, Jewish Voice for Peace, Harriet's Wildest Dreams, on and on and on. But we actually have not heard that much from students from Howard, and I thought today would be a good day to hear their perspective and what some of them have been doing. I'm going to ask Sam Collins to introduce the two guests and get us rolling.
No doubt. I've had the honor and pleasure of interacting with one of these guests, Elijah Pittman of Black Underground. But more relevantly, he is a Howard student. Him, along with Delaney Leonard, are both on the air this morning. We're going to reason about Dr. King's legacy. I thought it would be particularly interesting to hear from two HBCU students and also two internationalists, two people who can give us more of a Pan-African international perspective on King's legacy. So just going to open the floor. If you two can just, briefly introduce yourselves to the audience, let us know who you are.
Peace. Thank you so much for having me on. My name is Elijah Pittman. I'm an organizer. I started my college journey at Morgan State University in Baltimore. So I did 3 semesters there, and then I transferred to Howard University. So this is where I'm at now, and I'm starting my 3rd semester at Howard. And yeah, I mean, that's a little bit about me. I've been kind of in the organizing space since about 2017, 2018, when I was like much younger, just in middle school. And reading and just trying to like pull people together and things like that. And it's built up to where I am now. Delaney?
Hi, everybody. I'm Delaney. I'm a junior at Howard. I study psychology at Howard. And as was mentioned, I do identify as a Pan-Africanist. So that's kind of the lens that I organize from. I've been organizing since about 2022 consistently. So a little bit of a late bloomer compared to Elijah, but I'm really excited to be on today.
And late bloomer or not, it's just very powerful having the both of y'all here working so early in your lives. If y'all can just, offer brief reflections on King's legacy, what are you thinking about as Howard students with a new administration coming in, Black History Month not too far from now? What's on your mind?
Delaney, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So Elijah and I, we were kind of talking before the show this morning, kind of about just King and his legacy. And I think one of the reflections that I have is sort of the way that, and this is something that has been mentioned multiple times on the show today, the way that his legacy has really been distorted and sort of in this disgusting way to sort of highlight, these aspects that ultimately benefit white comfortability in this country, when we know that that's not all of the work that he did, right? And so something that I was telling Elijah earlier was, I think it's interesting how you have this figure who's kind of lauded as, you know, the herald of the civil rights movement, but then this figure has been so distorted. So what do we even understand about the civil rights movement when we consider how propagandized it has been? And so I think that's something that I'm kind of thinking about going into today, and also moving into the future of organizing as well, is when we have figures and we have movements that are so centralized around figures, what stories are we not learning about? Like, what realities of the masses, of the people that were also struggling alongside King, were also making militant contributions to the civil rights movement? How have we not kind of understood those things? And so I think that's something that is important to think about all the time, but especially on a day like today, which is literally centered around this figure, and of course around the movement as well. But we have to consider, what is our understanding of the civil rights movement, and how has that understanding been based around a very colonized perception of this figure? And so I'm kind of hand it over to Elijah, so we can piggyback off of that.
And Elijah, I'm going to jump in and say we really want to hear from you both what you've been doing around organizing around Gaza, and your thoughts on the ceasefire, because we're not hearing this from the mainstream media. So your voices and your work on that is extremely important.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. I guess real quick, when it comes to like my reflection, and then I'll go straight into sort of like the organizing Delaney and I have worked in around Gaza. One thing that I've really been thinking about, and there's this creator on YouTube named Desiree Wins, and she recently made this video called "Not Like Us: Doppelgangers in Black American Media." And something that was really interesting in that video, her conclusion ultimately is this idea that there are two Black Americas, and really that there are two Africans in the world. There's the African that is cleaned up and washed up and made presentable for the colonial over superstructure, and then there's a Black American, or the African in the world that is the wretched of the earth, that is predisposed to revolution. And these two Africans are they're inseparable. They're forever tied together. They are tethered together. For every successful African in the world, there's an African in the world who is unsuccessful and who is predisposed to revolution. The same thing is presented with Martin Luther King Jr. And I think that that's like a really, really interesting sort of perspective and lens to look at him through, in which he's been dichotomized by the overarching colonial superstructure, if we understand it through that lens. And when we understand it through that lens, it makes it really, really easy and like for analysis to understand how certain parts of Martin Luther King, his doppelganger that's cleaned up for the colonial superstructure, how that doppelganger is presented and postulated and posited as the presentable and acceptable Martin Luther King, whereas the less and more predisposed to revolution Martin Luther King is the one that is denigrated or kept away from the masses to understand. And just a quick little example of this, and this is how I'm going to quickly segue into Palestine and Gaza, is how Martin Luther King is cited when it comes to Gaza, right? We often see the citing, and this, I think Amy Schumer cited this about Martin Luther King. She said that, she cited his quote where he said, one second, what did he say? He says, oh, here we go. I found it. He said, the whole world must see that Israel must exist and has the right to exist and is one of the great outposts of democracy in the world. So this is that one doppelganger, right? The side that is the most useful for colonial propaganda. But King later says that when asked in an interview if Israel should give the land back, he says that, I think for the ultimate peace and security of the situation, it will probably be necessary for Israel to give up this conquered territory, because to hold on to it will only exacerbate the tensions and deepen the bitterness of the Arabs. So when we look at these two sort of combating images,
I appreciate that.
Frantz Fanon says that, I'm gonna wrap it up real quick, but Frantz Fanon says that the Negro is forever in combat with his own image. He says that in his text, Black Skin, White Masks. And this is, years removed from Martin Luther King's death. We're still seeing Martin Luther King in combat with his own image. And this is something that we face now as Africans who are organizers, being in combat with our own image. We are consistently in combat with what we're supposed to do as white, cleaned up Africans, and what we should be doing as people wanting better for the material conditions for Africans across the world. So Delaney and I both...
Now we got about a minute left. I do want you guys briefly to just delve into your organizing strategy for 2025 as we try to move beyond this pseudo ceasefire and just other issues affecting our people around the world.
Definitely. Yeah. So real quick for me, at least, I know that Delaney and I are both working very hard to root ourselves within the wretched of the earth. I think that's what MLK wanted us to do towards the end of his life, is root ourselves within the most denigrated and most unwanted population by the colonial superstructure. How do we root ourselves within that population? And I'll lob it over to Delaney to kind of talk about the strategies and practical application of that.
Yeah, so something that Elijah and I both practice when it comes to our organizing is coalition building. And I think this is something that's going to be really important, particularly moving into a new administration that is white supremacist. Every president is a white supremacist, but it's pretty explicit what Trump's policies are, what his desires are. And so coalition building, I think, is something that's going to be crucial because we don't all have the same skills. We don't all have the same bases, but we have the same goal. And the end goal is for the liberation of all Africans across the world. And so in order to do that, we need to combine our skills and we need to combine our capabilities. So Elijah and I are both a part of what we call a united front, which is made of organizations based at Howard, based in Baltimore, and then also based at George Washington University. And that's something that we're trying to build up because we think it's really important to combine efforts kind of across landscapes, across the DMV, to actually build power in the masses, because that work, that coalition work, it's being done, but it's not necessarily being done in a way that actually centers, houseless people on the streets, single mothers, like people who are struggling on a day-to-day basis. And so that's kind of where we're trying to base our work, exactly what Elijah was just talking about regarding the wretched of the earth. And to kind of tie it all back into the ceasefire and Palestine, all of the work that we're doing to disrupt sort of what Elijah referred to as the colonial superstructure, all of that labor, all of that work is ultimately work connected to Palestine, because the United States is a direct sponsor of Israel. And we know that Israel is not a legitimate state. We know that Israel is a settler colony that is infringing on the rights of Palestinians. And while we have this sort of what's being called a pseudo ceasefire, whatever, I think it's so important that we remember that exactly what's been said. The work isn't done. The work isn't done. The United States superstructure is still standing. The United States still has that hegemonic control over the region through Israel. And so we have to continue pushing and fighting and struggling to not only raise up the consciousness of our local people so that they understand what is happening to you, how you're houseless, you're not getting paid adequate wages, you don't have health care, while we're funding a settler colony. And that is a massive contradiction that we simply can't ignore, especially right now with this kind of ceasefire coming up. So I'll just kind of wrap it up there since I know we're like low on time.
Elijah Pittman and Delaney Leonard with the fire this morning. Really appreciate y'all. Thank you so much. We're going to make our transition.
But before we do that, I want to thank Sam for introducing me to Elijah.
Ms. Joni, I think you went on mute.
Okay, you hear me now? I'm saying that a lot of us are very, very proud to hear the two young people we just heard from, Howard University students, Elijah and Delaney. I want to thank Sam Collins for introducing me to Elijah, and we hope to have you on the airwaves more. I'm sure a lot of listeners are proud of you, and a lot of us can also feel our ancestors when we hear you. I know I can I can definitely feel my mom and my dad. They're very proud of you, and I'm sure other ancestors are as well. So with that said, we got to move on. We got to keep moving, but we thank you again. Our last segment is, and Sam can take it away, is going to be with young people right here in Anacostia.
Very, 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 very pleased and very happy to have this segment. I've had the chance to interact with two of these people quite recently, and one as recently as this morning. And I just got to say that you guys are in for a treat. We got Prince Hamm in the building, as well as Minister Calique Barnes and Leonard Jones of the Black Swan Academy. So we're going to call these three figures up to the stand just to reason with us briefly about Dr. King. Welcome to the show, y'all.
Well, thank you for having us, man. Thank you, Sister Joni, as well. Thank you, WPF.
Good to have y'all.
Make sure I can hear y'all.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh yeah, yes sir, yes sir.
Yes.
Thank you again for the opportunity. Thank you again to my great leaders that's inside this room as well, to Brother Tyrone Parker, to my brother Dr. Chapman, and everybody that's spoke before me. Thank you to the young people that's inside Howard University that's trailblazing this as well, doing that ceasefire work inside the community because all is needed. I want to just say thank you just for Dr. King for just having a dream for us to even be on the Zoom call today right now and being the president of all you great people as well. One of his great quotes that I like is when he always say, the time is always right to do what's right. So that's one of my famous quotes that I like from Dr. Klng as well. And it's crazy to say that some of his dreams, that the thing that he's fighting for that back then that we fighting for now, same things like advocacy for equity, fair housing acts, focus on economic justice, more worker rights, and things of that nature. So just the same fight that he fights back then, we're still doing the work right now inside our community.
Can you talk more about that work? Because I know I met you down at the National Mall last year. You were working to get compensation for violence victims. But if you can just talk more about your work. Every time I call you, it's funny. You're always out and about. If you can just tell us what you're doing.
So thank you again, Brother Collins. Yes, man. So just a little bit of the work that I do. I help out with a lot of average youth, returning citizens, the homeless, the elderly. I'm a youth coach, but my main focus is I put into a group of mothers by the acronym of SAM, stands for Strong Ass Mothers. And all these mothers lost their children due to gun violence, right? And they out here turning their pain into a purpose. So when you saw me down there at that march, we was marching for people from victims of gun violence as well. Just in some of that work that we do, we out here getting street renames out of them. We're making sure that no other parent has to join that fraternity or sorority, right? Because it's a pain that nobody wants to have to ever have to go through. We actually going to do a stage play again next month as well as for all these mothers. Just making sure people has to never go through that, man. That's one of the main things that I do, just trying to make sure nobody has to go through that same type of trauma. Being more proactive than reactive, like the other brother said.
No doubt, no doubt. And also have Minister Calique Barnes in the building. Definitely want to shout him out. For those of y'all who don't know, Minister Barnes, if I recall correctly, last year spoke at the MLK breakfast and brought the house down. And not too long ago, he became the student representative on the State Board of Education. I believe 1 out of 4. And you're the only Ward 8 representative, student representative. All right, man, that's awesome. So, if you can just talk to us about your work, Minister Barnes, exactly, what it is you're doing on behalf of young people and how that fits with King's legacy.
Of course. So right here in Ward 8, we currently, can you hear me? No? Okay.
Speak up.
So right here in Ward 8, we currently we see a lot of injustice, we see a lot of poverty, we see a lot of things that's happening, and Dr. Klng definitely set an example and set a precedent of what it looks like to bring forth Black excellence. He showed what it looks like to bring forth positivity despite negativity. He shows what it looks like to bring forth nothing but Black love, Black joy, Black peace, despite being in the presence of opposition. While I believe there's still much work to do and that work needs to be done through our youth more, I believe we need to definitely acknowledge him more, not simply only on Black History Month and not only on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. But I do believe we should begin to go throughout this walk throughout all 365 days of the year, because him being who he is, him doing what he did, it truly set an example and it set a foundation of what the world should look like. And I'm definitely glad that he did what he did and he stood for what he stood for, and that should give us the determination, the power, the man willingness to do what we need to do to thrive in this world that we're living in, especially what we're getting ready to take on within the next 4 years. So Black excellence definitely is something that needs to be more stood up.
Calique, I'm going to ask you, in addition to talking about Dr. King would want you to share some of the things that you see in the community. One of the things you shared with me is what's happening with the teachers and what's happening to the education system. If you could share a little bit about that, including that teacher that you told me about who had asthma, you tell the story. Very important.
Of course. So me being on the State Board of Education, I'm able to interact with a lot of teachers and students. We have a lot of teachers who are complaining a lot about being underfunded. We have a lot of teachers who are complaining about simply just the working condition that they're working in. There was a teacher who came to the table to testify regarding her asthma. She was placed in the basement floor of the school. I'm not sure what school it was, but she was placed in the basement floor of the school, and it was very moist in there, and her asthma began to get triggered because of that. And with that, she was unable to attend work, and because she was unable to attend work, they wanted to attempt to terminate her. Which was definitely negative because it's a lot of teachers out here who are struggling. They're not receiving the assistance they need. They're not receiving the resources they need to assist students. They're not receiving the just support in general to assist these students and do what they need to do to be at their best within the school environment. And it's definitely not right, especially being that as though that they're underfunded as well. A lot of teachers, and this is why we don't see a lot of teacher retention within the District of Columbia, within DCPS and DC Public Charter, because lack of resources. We invest a lot of money into the wrong things instead of where the root of our city is. It's in our young people, and who's going to be there for our young people? These educators. So we need to definitely pour into our educators. We recently spent $1.5 million on outdoor ventilation for the inauguration, and that was just a waste of money. So when we could have put that and invested that into our young people, into our educators, and that's really what it could have been.
Speaking truth to power right there. My goodness. All right, my man Calique Barnes. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. Definitely want to segue to on London Jones. Calique definitely brought up a good point about the budget. London Jones, member of the Black Swan Academy, from my understanding, he's been in it from the 7th grade on, and now London, a student in the Posse program at Lafayette University, is still working with the Black Swan Academy. If he wouldn't mind, London, just please talk about what's coming up, what has been happening, and how all of that fits in the King's legacy.
Yes. So I started Black Swan when I was about 13, in the 7th grade. I took it seriously when I was in the 8th grade. And from then on, before I joined Black Swan, I didn't really know that I had a voice as a youth member of the DC community. But I think that Black Swan, no, I don't think, I know that Black Swan has given me the platform and given me the courage to speak up and to give me the confidence to speak out about things that I'm seeing in my community that I don't like. And I feel like even MLK knew that, MLK Jr. knew that the youth can lead this country or can lead their communities. And they know what they're going through, they know what they're experiencing, and they're not too impatient, they're not irresponsible, that the youth, if given the opportunity, can create change. And that's also what Black Swan believes. So, Black Swan is a youth-led organization that equips youth and underserved communities with skills to improve their civic engagement and leadership in the hopes of creating a pipeline of Black youth leaders. And it's been successful in doing that. We always have our Black youth agendas, and we're currently working on our 6th Black youth agenda. Our first one was in 2018. And I just think that it's a beautiful thing to see the youth rise and advocate for themselves, especially when we live in a society that believes they are not capable of doing so.
Now I got a question. This can go out to any one of y'all, London, Calique, Prince. When Dr. King was at the height of his advocacy, we didn't have much electoral representation, not like what we saw during the Reconstruction era. Now that we have, one young brother going to the Wilson building, we got another one at the state board, and another one in the grassroots still interacting with the powers that be. What's your goal as far as raising young people's awareness about the political process? Is that still something, for us to do? Is that something that's difficult? How do y'all find that part of the mission? Just being young people and knowing what young people are going through as far as their distrust of the system.
So I do want to jump on that and say that being politically aware is one of the most important things you can do. And I remember during election season during November, as I was going through, me being a disabled, I was going through, different polls and sites and just encouraging young people to get out and vote. And there was a lot of people, and I'm talking here in Ward 8, who did not even know who was on the ballot. And that's the bare minimum of being politically aware. There was a lot of young people who didn't know who their council member is, who their ANC is, because it's not, number one, it's not being taught in school. You're not hearing much about government or legislation or anything like that within the school building. The only time you hear it is if you're in AP government, which is an issue. So I believe, with us being youth advocates and us, advocating for equity, advocating for justice, advocating before we get to, advocating for the big things, we have to begin to go back down to the small things, understanding what the political, process is. How do the president become president? A lot of people don't know it, so being advocates, we should, begin to go out of our way to express that and explain, what that looks like.
My man, either London or Prince, y'all got it.
I just wanted to add that, like, with Black Swan and equipping youth with the skills to be
Prince, if you wouldn't mind, speaking to what you see being an organizing strategy to get more people involved from the grassroots. How do we do that as a people?
Go ahead and finish. Use cut Landon. I'll go ahead, Brother Landon. I'm sorry, I'll answer that after you. Good.
Sure. Go ahead, Prince.
I didn't know, brother. I didn't know if Landon was in the studio.
We're on because we only have a.
Oh no, I was talking, but all I was just gonna say is Black Swan, we do go over like our council members and things like that because we are aware that youth don't have the resources, or some youth don't have the resources or don't even know where to start when it comes to creating change within our communities. So that's like familiarizing ourselves with our council members, learning who our ANCs are in our neighborhoods, and knowing where to go to when we have an issue about the things that are occurring in our community. That's just what I wanted to add.
Okay, Prince, you have the final word on this, and I also want you to share a little bit. What does your organization MAD stand for? And I've heard some very compelling stories when I've been at sessions where you speak. So answer Sam's question, but also tell us a little more about what MAD does, or your organization does, and how you support young people.
So, Sam, can you ask the question one more time, please, Sam?
Sam, your question for Prince.
Basically, I'm just trying to get more of a sense of how do you go about engaging people in the grassroots, especially those who might not be as confident about the system or trusting of the system. What's your strategy as far as bridging that gap?
Okay. So the first question is yours. The first thing I do is meet them where they at, right? Because everybody comes from different walks of life. And some people trying to come put their insight on somebody else without even understanding where they first started, where they're coming from. So that's the first thing, meeting where they're at, and make sure that we're moving with a place of love, where you're meeting them where they're at. And make sure that I collaborate with people like-minded people, like my mentors on this phone, like Mr. Parker, Dr. Chapman, brothers like Landon, Lil Calique, and even people at Howard, right? Making sure that we bridging that gap, because I can do a lot with me, but way more with we, right? Because it's some things that I'm not going to be able to do that they may be able to do. And not being scared and moving with whoever's higher than yourself. And to answer your question, Ms. Joni, how I got started with MAD, just like the acronym in the back, whatever makes you mad, what can you do to make a difference about it? I got started this journey inside 2017. I probably went to more candlelight visuals and funerals in 1 year than most people will probably ever go through in a lifetime. All right, so I wanted to change that narrative, right? Because it's easy to give somebody a gun and trying to go do something, but I wanted to change that and give somebody a book bag and trying to be the next Barack Obama before they can make a difference inside their life. Because everybody's not built for this lifestyle, right? I'm tired of seeing mothers cry, I'm tired of seeing fathers cry. right? So I wanted to change that narrative. So I go inside the jails, help out with the youth being proactive. I go inside the schools, teaching conflict resolution, teach them opioid things as well. Because one thing that we do when we do go through gun violence, the next thing we do, we go self-medicate, right? So we in the opioid epidemic as well, which we in the top 10 in the nation, right? So we got to come together and start rallying against each other, creating more groups, the parenthood groups, right? Even more fatherhood groups, because it's the lack of fatherness inside the household. 85% of lack of fatherness inside the household is the reason why we go to jail, right? So we got to make sure we also holding the police accountable. We talking about justice for justice, right? Nobody got held accountable for that, right? So we got to make sure we hold the police accountable as well, right? That make sure we're doing police reform, and just make sure that we just sticking together and moving with love, and again, and being thankful for the people like you guys that pioneered the way, like you say, Tyrone Parker and the Dr. Chapmans and the Dr. Klngs, right? So just continue to keep doing the work, right? Because Martin Luther King already did it. They did it when people were spitting in their face. They did it when people was calling them niggas, and they still got a 4.0 GPA. So we could keep doing it too right now, keep putting our best foot forward and making sure that God put his hands on everybody on this call. So again, I'm thankful for the opportunity just to be in this room with everybody that's on here. So thank you again, and continue to keep doing the great work.
And thank you, Prince. Thank you for the wonderful leadership. I've had the blessing of hearing you and some of the young people that you work with doing really outstanding work. Prince Hamm, we thank you. We thank Calique, Minister Calique Barnes as well. And of course, London with our three young people doing really wonderful work. We're going to jump now. We're almost out of time. We want to leave a few moments for final comments. And I'm going to ask Tyrone, Dr. Chapman, as well as Sam, and let's see, either Elijah or Delaney to make some very quick, you can get something in 1 minute. Let's start with Tyrone, you ready?
Oh, yeah, certainly. This has been a very rich and deep conversation. The young folks have brought together a composition of what we got to do to come together. We got to be able to bridge those individuals that have technically been left out of this equation. How do we take a deep dive, as Prince said, and begin to show love and concern and commitment? And I'm going to end on my statement of this here. Dr. Martin Luther King's one of the most famous statements that I subscribe to is that love is the one most single component that has the capabilities of transforming your enemies into your friends. We got to love the hell out of our people so that they'll be able to build together. It don't make a difference about Trump or who else is in the White House. As long as we got God and love, we'll overcome it all. Thank you.
Tyrone Parker, thank you very much for all the help that you do each and every day and for the help you gave for this particular program. We appreciate you always. I'm going to ask also, of course, we much remember this day the reason why one major reason why he was killed, because he stood up against the war in Vietnam. He was killed exactly 1 year later since he made that speech. He was gone. So we know we appreciate the people who are continuing to stand up against war. And I wanted to ask our young people from Howard to make a comment. Delaney, perhaps you or Elijah, both of you, real quick.
Yeah, so I think there's been a lot of things that have been talked about today that are really important reflections. And I would say that I think really the biggest takeaway is that moving into 2025 and of course over the next 4 years, but even beyond that, it's just really important to maintain integrity, maintain strength, and to maintain community. I think that those things are going to become as important as ever, particularly in organizing spaces. It's so important that we're building these connections beyond just politically struggling together, but also knowing each other and being there for each other and able to support one another, because that support is not going to be coming from, and of course we know that it never really was coming from the administration, but particularly an administration that is going to be as explicitly white supremacist as Trump's administration. It's just important that we really build strong interpersonal connections. So that's kind of what I want to emphasize, is that organizing isn't just the only time that I'm communicating with you shouldn't only be when we're planning an action or we're planning to do a distribution. We should also know each other as people and be able to support one another in that.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you, Delaney Leonard. Real quick, Elijah Pittman, your final statement.
Yeah, I mean, finally, I just want to say, I think it's really crucial that we find in our own generations and in our own age groups who are the people who we don't typically see ourselves in social interactions with, and how do we find those people and root ourselves amongst those people. I know that for us at Black Underground, we're working in Baltimore to reach out to youth spaces, especially youth that are growing up in working class communities in Baltimore City, and then we're rooting ourselves in recruiting amongst those populations specifically. So I think across generations, that should be what we do. Looking at who is the working class in our generation and how do we root ourselves amongst that. I know Sam does a great job of that, and I know that all of us as organizers do a great job of that. And I think that that's really the thing I want to leave.
Thank you very much, Elijah Pittman. I'm going to thank a few people, but then I'm going to throw the ball to Sam for a final comment, as well as Dr. Chapman. But before we leave you today, I want to thank Kalia, our engineer, who does an outstanding job as always. I want to thank Sam Collins and Tyrone Parker for really helping to put this show together today with suggestions of guests. Thanks to my ToHealDC team, Mari, Chuck Hicks, and Crystal for all the help you gave. And remember, we're going to be continuing this discussion on WPFW, talking about the Radical King until midnight tonight. So with that said, I'm going to ask Sam your final thoughts. We appreciate you and what you have to say today.
No doubt. Real briefly, just really encouraging everybody to remain steadfast. Don't let the second Trump administration be a time to sit on the sidelines. Do whatever you need to do. In DC, budget season's coming up very soon, so I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of y'all down there really agitating for what it is exactly that y'all need. And my last thought, when we talk about young people in leadership, young people are not window dressing. When you give them leadership positions, really make sure that they have a chance to affect change. Do not stop them.
Right on. Tyrone was smiling there. Dr. Chapman.
I'm so excited that Sam brought these fabulous students without mentioning the name of Frantz Fanon. They mentioned the books, Black Skin, White Mask, The Wretched of the Earth. They understand colonialism. I encourage you to come out Friday and Saturday to the program at Howard, the W. Montague Cobb Institute, and you will understand what I'm talking about when I show you how our healthcare system is designed in a colonial manner, that it's a plantation system, that it's not designed to get us healthy. It's a sick care system to make money for other people. So you are that connection. I am so elated to have met you, but I want to meet you personally. I will share my slides freely and my time because this is so critical that I have found what I need, the connection to the next generation.
Yes. We still have maybe 1 or 2 minutes left. We're going to go out with a quick song. And again, we encourage everybody to stay tuned at WPFW. There's going to be some powerful programming up until midnight today. And again, one of the themes of these past 2 hours has been to look at, with the spirit of Dr. King, to discover how to organize our strength into compelling power. Power is what we're talking about. Tyrone.
Thank you, Joni. Thank you so very much. From the historical church, Union Temple Baptist Church. And still we stand to make a difference. Thank you all.
Absolutely. And we still have about 2 more minutes to go.
Oh, we still got 2 minutes.
Yeah, we do. And again, I just really want to repeat this quote, because this is Dr. Klng's quote. Our task is to discover how to organize our strength into compelling power. And I think that's what Sam has in his mind, if I may say so. It's one thing to talk about the problems, but it's another thing to organize for change. And that's what we all need to be thinking more and more about. Anybody want to jump in?
You know what, Johnny? Martin Luther King also said, silence from my friends was my biggest disappointment. Silence from my friends was my biggest disappointment. When you stand silent in the midst of challenging times and say nothing, that is a disappointment. Youth, those youth that's on this, we are so proud and so encouraged and so inspired from your comment that you unify and that you make a difference for the greater good of our people as a whole and all.
Absolutely. Sam, you want to jump in with anything else? Again, I think organizing is the challenge. How do we organize? And so we're not always in silos.
Organizing that's an ongoing process from my understanding. And it just comes from building community and building trust and always acting in good faith. If people know that they can trust you for the regular stuff, if I can call you and for just to, check in, but you don't need anything, I feel like that establishes a rapport that makes it so that we're not always reactive. We're more so proactive because we need that, we shouldn't have been chilling during Biden's administration. We should have been doing more organizing. Well, we have been, but the point is we should just remain consistent. I'll stop there.
That's right. That's right.
Chuck, are you still with us? If you are, you could jump in. Chuck Hicks was on the phone, and many of people know Chuck. Not only was he very active as a union leader, his dad was one of the founders of the Deacons for Defense in Louisiana, but Chuck may not still be on the phone. Anyone else for the final comment?
I want to say thank you, Ms. Joni. Thank you to you, Brother Sam and Brother Parker, just again having this conversation that we could be here with one another, man. So I want to say thank you again. Everybody just continue to keep striving for greatness. We have to be the change that we want to see and continue to keep moving with love. We don't spell it L-O-V-E, we spell it T-I-M-E. Put time in one another to understand what love looks like, what they feel, and what it needs to be to keep continuing to make a difference.
In Cruz meeting, communities survive the will to protect each other. We meet every Wednesday over at the Nation of Islam as community-based organization. We have about 25 to 30 different organizations that come together to be able to show that we're making a commitment for transformation when we are doing it on a volunteer basis to make the difference for change in our community. Every Wednesday at 5:30 at the Nation of Islam on Pennsylvania Avenue, we're meeting there. Cruz.
And I must say, Cruz is a very inspiring organization. Say again what the initials stand for, Tyrone.
Go ahead, Reverend. Let Chapman, Dr. Chapman, jump in.
Yes, Dr. Chapman. Cruz is just very, very inspiring. Wednesday, remind me or tell everyone what those initials stand for.
Communities respecting each other's will to exist. Communities respecting each other's will to exist. That's what Cruz stands for.
Absolutely. We're out of time. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to the listeners. Thank you, Kalia. We're hopefully going to go out with the outro song, but stay tuned to WPFW. Find out more about the Radical King now until midnight.
I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. This morning with my mind set on freedom. Woke up this morning.